The Audio Beacon, November 2022. With gratitude, bountiful God, I gather berries, pick apples, and retrieve the last of the vegetables from the garden. Thank you for autumn smells of bonfires, rotting leaves, and newly turned earth. Wayne Simzik, Garden Prayers. This is the month of nuts and nutty thoughts. That November, whose name sounds so bleak and cheerless, perhaps its harvest of thought is worth more than all the other crops of the year. Henry David Thoreau. For several weeks I passed a shrine that had been erected at the side of a slip road leading down from the A14. It marked the spot where a young man was killed on his motorbike, leaving behind his partner and young son. I saw it being created a few days after his death by a group of young people. They gathered to write their names and messages of farewell on the lamppost and to lay flowers. A sad but somehow comforting sight, for it meant this young family were not alone as they struggled to make sense of what had happened, grapple with their grief, and look to their new future. Sadly, some find public displays following such tragedy uncomfortable and unnecessary. But death should not be confined and controlled, hidden away so that it does not intrude on other people's lives. When we lose somebody we love, we shed tears. Yet how often I have heard people apologise when they cry, as though somehow they have behaved inappropriately. Death is an unpleasant reality of life. It is the worst thing that we can experience. Those who grieve have every right to express those feelings and to meet with compassion. Yet still, in places, displays of emotion can be perceived as a weakness, a lack of self-control. C.S. Lewis, after the death of his beloved wife, wrote, "An odd byproduct of my loss is that I'm aware of being an embarrassment to everyone I meet." This month we do a lot of remembering of those who have died, and we will shed tears. On 13th of November we have Remembrance Sunday in all the churches across the Benefice, when we gather together within our communities to think about all who have died and sadly continue to die in war. Before that, on Sunday 30th of October, we have All Saints' Day, when we remember Christian martyrs and all who have been faithful Christians. On Sunday 6th of November, we have a Benefice bereavement service in Kintbury Church at 3 p.m. This is an opportunity for people from across the Benefice to gather for a service to commemorate those they have lost through death, to remember the people whose presence shone light into our lives. Through the service, we also share a trust in God's promises, and we look forward with hope. It is not a maudlin service, but one which is reflective and full of love and peace. There is a warm invitation to anyone who would like to remember their loved ones to come. During the service, there will be hymns, readings, a short talk, and an opportunity to light a candle in the memory of a loved one. Then the names of all those being remembered will be read out and wrapped in our prayers. This year you will also be offered the opportunity to write on a wooden disc to be hung on one of the trees in the churchyard. Love and blessings, Annette. They that love beyond the world cannot be separated by it. Death cannot kill what never dies. William Penn. October 9th was a splendid Sunday at Enbourne. Canon Rita Ball celebrated the Eucharist at 9:45. The church looked beautiful in the warm October sunlight. Canon Ball welcomed us and presided over a lovely reverential service, which included a thoughtful sermon on the 10 lepers, only one of which returned to thank Jesus. Most gratifying of all for me was that most of Enbourne's worshipping congregation were present, including those in their 90s. In the evening, Father Gary organised another Forest Church service. The weather remained fine as the congregation, mainly from St. John's and St. George's, gathered in the fading light. They sat around a blazing fire, lovingly tended by Steve Kerry, listening to words and music chosen by Father Gary. It was a most reflective and atmospheric service in Embourne churchyard, attended by children and adults of all ages. The service ended with the congregation enjoying toasted marshmallows and looking forward eagerly to the next Forest Church. John King. Forest Church at Enbourne by Phil Ireland. Tessa and I went to the Enbourne Forest Church service that John King describes above. The evening was a lot less warm than the service we went to in the summer, but it was just as spiritually inspiring as the previous service, each being quite distinct from the other in keeping with their seasons. There were probably about 30 to 40 people, including some lively but well-behaved younger people who participated by bringing various items round for the congregation to share. We were enthusiastically greeted by Father Gary, who, amazingly, remembered us from the summer service, and we sat in the circle of chairs and chatted and watched the golden flames of the bonfire in the middle. In the summer, the bonfire had to be replaced by a rather pleasant small pond of reflective water due to the drought conditions and the risk of wildfires, but this night the fire led us into the evening. Father Gary led us in rehearsal of the songs that we would sing later, before leading us into the service with an opening prayer. We then sang a Forest Church remix of Wild Mountain Thyme, followed by a silence to allow us to connect to the autumn senses and a reading from Ecclesiastes, "For everything there is a season." The service continued with a meditation, poems, prayers, and an opportunity once again to take in the beautiful country churchyard, this time in its autumn garb. The service ended with another song, Rose Hip November by Vashti Bunyan. During the service, we each received an apple as a symbol of autumn and the fruits of the harvest. We could either eat it during the service or bring it away for later, which I did. After the service ended, the fire was put to excellent culinary use, the toasting of marshmallows for us all. Another splendid evening service, and Tessa and I eagerly await the next one. Letter from Bishop Olivia, Diocese of Oxford, Reading Episcopal Area, the Right Reverend Olivia Graham. 10th of October, 2022. To PCC members in the Walbury Beacon Benefice. Dear colleagues, I am writing to tell you that the Reverend Becky Bevan has formally been licensed as non-stipendiary Associate Minister in the Walbury Beacon Benefice, for the sole purpose of supporting Embourne during the transition period taking place as they move through the pastoral reorganisation process towards Embourne being united with South Newbury Benefice. There will be no expectation that Becky will be exercising ministry in other parishes in Walbury Beacon Benefice, and there are no financial implications attached to this change. Yours sincerely, the Right Reverend Olivia Graham. November commemorations. 11th. We reflected last year upon St. Martin, and that he was the soldier saint commemorated on Armistice Day. 20th. St. Edmund, aged 28, killed for his faith, his body reputed to have been guarded by a wolf. Once England's patron saint, also patron saint of pandemics, those who wish to reinstate him might think of flying the white dragon flag on the 20th. 30th, St. Andrew, a Christian apostle and the older brother to St. Peter. According to the New Testament, Andrew was born in the village of Bethsaida on the Sea of Galilee during the early 1st century. With his brother Simon, he was also a fisherman. Andrew's very name means strong, and he was known for having good social skills. Matthew says, "It is said Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee and saw Andrew and Simon Peter fishing. It is then he asked the two to become disciples and fishers of men." However, John tells a separate story, stating Andrew was a disciple of John the Baptist. When Jesus walked by one day, John the Baptist stated, "Behold, the Lamb of God." It is then that Andrew and another made the decision to follow Jesus. Little else is said about Andrew in the Gospels, but it is believed he was one of the closer disciples to Jesus. It was he who told Jesus about the boy with the loaves and fishes, according to John 6:8. When Philip wanted to speak to Jesus about Greeks seeking him, he spoke to Andrew first. Andrew was also present at the Last Supper. Per Christian tradition, Andrew went on to preach around the shores of the Black Sea and throughout what is now Greece and Turkey. He was martyred by crucifixion in Patras. Andrew's remains were originally preserved at Patras. However, some believe St. Regulus, who was a monk at Patras, received a vision telling him to hide some of Andrew's bones. Shortly after Regulus's dream, many of Andrew's relics were transferred to Constantinople by order of Roman Emperor Constantius II around 357. Regulus later received orders in a second dream, telling him to take the bones to the ends of the earth. He was to build a shrine for them wherever he shipwrecked. He landed on the coast of Fife, Scotland. Don't think my Scottish in-laws would think much of Scotland being the ends of the earth. St. Andrew is the patron saint of fishermen and singers. He is also the patron saint to several countries and cities, including Scotland, Romania, Russia, Ukraine, and Patras. Martinmas was a time of feasting and drinking, giving rise to the term Martin drunk. As Remembrance Day is almost upon us, there are few left to remember World War II, and World War I is history. Those who lived through it seldom spoke about it. One of those who perished was the composer George Butterworth. English composer, folk song collector, and country dancer, he was killed in 1916 at Pozières, France, during the Battle of the Somme, aged just 31. In the chaos of war, Butterworth was buried where he fell, and his remains were never subsequently identified. He was a leading member of a radical group of composers in the Edwardian years, whose music was profoundly influenced by the traditional music of the English rural working class. There is, on the internet, a poignant film of Butterworth dancing with Cecil Sharp and the Carpel sisters. Folk dancing was very popular in World War I. 15 dance teachers went out to the front to teach in convalescent camps. He is best remembered for The Banks of Green Willow and his settings for the poem Shropshire Lad. Many soldiers went to the trenches with a copy of Shropshire Lad in their pockets. Into my heart an air that kills from yon far country blows. What are those blue remembered hills? What spires, what farms are those? That is the land of lost content. I see it shining plain, the happy highways where I went, and cannot come again. Houseman. Story my grandmother told me. Although I usually write about people or events with links to our Benefice, my piece this month concerns somewhere a little further away, with only a very tenuous connection to Kintbury at the very end. However, given that it is the month of November, in which our thoughts turn towards commemoration of war, it is a story I felt I wanted to share. In the years after the First World War, my grandmother Rosie worked in domestic service. Just like thousands of other young women of her age and background, her career prospects were relatively limited compared to those of young men of her age, who were more likely to enter a craft or trade. So, in her early 20s, Rosie worked in a series of big houses throughout Oxfordshire and Berkshire. Rosie worked for an agency, which meant that her places of employment were varied, rather than staying with one family, and for a time she worked at Bagner Manor, just outside Newbury. Here she met Ethel Chalice, a Newbury girl also working at the manor, and the two were to remain lifelong friends. From the village of Bagner, it was not far for the two girls to walk across Snelsmore Common or up to Donnington Castle. In those days, not a listed building, or under the protection of English heritage. In fact, back then there was actually a cottage, now long since demolished, adjoining the castle. There was one thing about that cottage which my gran particularly remembered, and it was this. Apparently it had been the custom, during the war years of 1914 to 18, for families who had sons serving in the armed forces to display a white card in the window of their homes. If the son was killed, the white card was replaced with a black one. The cottage at Donnington Castle showed 3 black cards in the window. That poor woman, Gran would say, had lost all 3 sons. Of course, my grandmother was never able to find out anything else about the family from the castle cottage, but I, however, have access to Ancestry, and so I'm able to find out a little bit more. The cottage was home to the Adnams family. Joseph and his wife Ellen had 7 children: Henry, George, Maud, William, Ernest, Frederick, and Rosie. Although my grandmother had imagined the family's mother placing the black cards in the cottage window, it seems that Ellen had died before the outbreak of war, so it would have been Joseph or one of the other children who had placed the cards where they could still be seen by passers-by several years after the Great War had ended. It was the 3 eldest boys who had lost their lives in the conflict. And, although the War Memorial at Shaw Church records other men by the name of Adnams having been killed, as far as I can tell, Ernest and Frederick were not among them. Obviously, I never knew the Adnams family, and only able to research further based on what my gran had originally told me years ago. I was none the less pleased to find out that Joseph Adnams had 2 other sons as well as 2 daughters, who had, as far as I could tell, survived the war. The census returns list the Adnams family cottage as the castle, which might, in years to come, confuse a researcher who does not realise that there was a cottage back then, adjoining what remained of the castle. Also, I have never heard or read anywhere else of the custom of displaying a white card in the window to indicate having a family member serving in the 1914 to 1918 war. Perhaps these are just 2 very small examples of the importance of oral history and of talking to family and friends. For any local history enthusiast, there is a particular satisfaction and joy in being able to authenticate snippets of information by cross-referencing with facilities such as Ancestry or the British Newspaper Archive, or other published references. My gran remained friends with Ethel Challis for the rest of her life. Ethel never married, and as a very old lady, lived for a time in the original No Trees, where my family visited when I was about 10. This was my first visit to Kintbury, long before I ever knew it would become my home. Tessa Locke. This would resonate with my husband's family. His grandmother, a MacLean of Duart, brought up her younger siblings when their mother died. In the Great War, 3 of her brothers were killed. We have the letter inviting her to the unveiling of the cenotaph in Aldershot Barracks. Ed. End thought. Originea says God still walks in the garden of our souls, searching for us. Martha and Mary. Martha had a garden, and she tended it with care. She took a pail and watered it. Each slug or snail she slaughtered it. There were no greenfly there. She scratched and scraped it with a hoe. There were no seeds she didn't sow, and yet her garden wouldn't grow. Mary had a garden, which is full of happy flowers. She doesn't do a thing in it, but walk about and sing in it, for hours and hours and hours. She never weeds and never hoes, and yet her garden always grows, because she loves it, I suppose. If only. Reginald Arkle. Weather Law. A saying of my grandfather, and apparently connected with St. Andrew's Day. Ice in November to hold a duck, rest of the winter will be a muck. Walbury Beacon Benefice contact details. Rector, Reverend Canon Annette Shannon, 01488 646 385. Jenny Veazey, 01488 657 911. Email jennyveazey@hotmail.com. Benefice Office, 01635 226 064. Email wbboffice@gmail.com. Items for the beacon to Penny on Ian_Fletcher43 @btinternet.com, or Phil on pji@crestednewtcomputing.co.uk. To be added to the beacon distribution list, please email the office. Benefice website www.walburybeaconbenefice.org.uk. Benefice information can also be found on A Church Near You, https://www.achurchnearyou.com. Services in Walbury Beacon Benefice for November 2022. To check for changes, please check the weekly Benefice email if you're on the circulation list. Add your name. Contact the Walbury Beacon Benefice office on wbboffice@gmail.com. Look on the website https://www.walburybeaconbenefice.org.uk, or A Church Near You, https://www.achurchnearyou.com, for up-to-date information, confirmation of service times and location. In order to protect more vulnerable parishioners, we would appreciate those attending services in all our churches to continue to practice hand sanitising, wearing of face masks, and respect for those who wish to maintain social distancing. For Remembrance Day services, please check the website, Church Near You, or notice boards. Friday, 11th of November, 10:50 a.m. 2 minutes silence in Church Street, Kintbury. Sunday, 13th of November, 10:50 a.m. War Memorial. 10:55 a.m. Service in St Mary's, Kintbury. No information from other churches available at time of publication. Sunday, 6th of November, Kintbury, Holy Communion, 8 a.m. Inkpen, Holy Communion, 9:45 a.m. Kintbury, All Souls, 3 p.m. Sunday, 13th of November, Kintbury, Remembrance, at War Memorial, 10:50 a.m. In church, 10:55 a.m. West Woody, Remembrance, time to be confirmed. Inkpen, Remembrance, time to be confirmed. Coombe, Remembrance, time to be confirmed. Sunday, 20th November, Christ the King, Kintbury, Holy Communion, 9:45 a.m. Coombe, Holy Communion, 11:15 a.m. Inkpen, Holy Communion, 8:30 a.m. Sunday, 27th of November, first Sunday of Advent. Kintbury, Holy Communion, 8 a.m. Inkpen, Holy Communion, 9:45 a.m.